We've already covered the expectation to receive the benefits from God when we forgive. And last week we began talking about the fact that when we are wronged, and one of the reasons we should forgive is to trust God to handle the situation properly, okay? And so we looked at 1 Peter from the 2nd chapter, where Peter talks about Jesus being our example and the fact that he went through everything that we went through, except when he suffered, instead of him striking back, he committed himself to the one who judges righteously. So that was the thing. And then we began to touch some on the 37th division of Psalms. And we were there. That's where we left off. And so let's go back there, the 37th division of Psalms, and we're going to be looking at verses 1 through 8. And as I had looked deeper into this lesson, one of the things that I saw, I know we read, but I think it's important, as I kept looking at it, to look at some other translations from this. One of the things, because I had a member ask me this, and I think this is important, and I want you all to always remember this. I want y'all to always remember this. The Bibles that we read, no matter the translation, and I want you to remember this, even the King James translation, because a lot of people, and I've heard people say this before and talk about this before. I used to have an aunt that said, you shouldn't read nothing but the King James. But it's important to remember that the King James is just a translation. Now, I don't mean just a translation to downplay it, but here's the point that I'm saying. It is not any more important than the NIV. That's also a translation. The New King James is a translation. The original Bible and the original text from the Bible, most of us don't speak that language. And so the King James Bible was translated under the commission and the authority of King James, who asked them to take the original text and translate it into English. And this is what I explained because this particular member, I think it had a disagreement with somebody about that and about the King James Bible and being careful. The reason that there are other translations other than the King James, because at one time that was the only translation, but the reason the others came along is because think about the King James Bible and how it was translated. It was translated into the King's English, okay? And so if it was translated into the King's English, a lot of those words, we don't talk like that. That's why sometimes when you're reading the King James, you find yourself getting caught up or having trouble kind of understanding it because they're speaking, that's how they talk in England. We don't talk like that. And I gave the member this example. I said, say for example, I said to you, bring your damsel over hither to my dwelling. Exactly. You would say, what in the world is you talking about? You would say, what are you talking about? But that's how they talk. That's the King's English. That's how they talk. They would say, hither to my dwelling. But we say, hey, bring your girl over here to my house. That's how we talk. And so a lot of these other translations, all they're doing is taking what they took out of the original text and putting it in a language where you can understand it better. So I just wanted to tell y'all that because a lot of times people will try to drill that in you, and they'll try to make you think you're wrong because you read the NIV. Don't fall into that, okay? If that's an easier read for you, then read it. Because here's the key thing about always when you're studying God's Word. I don't care if it was written in Ebonics. God has to give you the revelation. So it doesn't matter what language is written in. It's God that gives the revelation. His Holy Spirit. That's why you always pray before you read God's word and ask him to give you the revelation and the understanding. And if you do, he will. Okay? And so like I said, it doesn't matter what language is written in. If God doesn't help you understand it, you ain't going to understand it. Okay? All right, so with that being said, and the reason I told y'all all of that is because as we go through verses 1 through 8 tonight, we're going to look at some different translations other than the New King James, or if whoever reads tonight reads from the King James. But we may look at some other translations because they read easier and they sound more like we talk now, okay? All right, so let's get back to the 37th division of Psalms. That's where we are, Psalms 37. And we'll go ahead. I know we had started last week. I think we just only begun to touch some on it, but let's go ahead and start back at number 1 because and we'll go through that. All right, so let's start Psalm 37 and 1. All right, stop right there. So see, that's a what translation is that, Mr. Jackson? That's the NIV, okay? So like I said, the only time you hear the word fret now is if you're reading the Bible. I don't know anybody who goes around and talks and says, don't fret, okay? And so when we look at these scriptures, and in particular these passages of scripture, if we're talking about allowing God to handle the situation, like I explained to you last week, I think one of the things that we oftentimes get caught up on, and one of the reasons that this becomes hard, is because, number one, we do fret because of evildoers. And we'll look at them, particularly if we're on the receiving end of the evil that they are doing, okay? And we'll begin to say things like, it's not fair. You know, God, how can you let this happen? That ain't right, okay? And we'll begin, because we're saying that and we're thinking that way, we'll begin to fret ourselves based on what someone else is doing. But here in this psalm, and this is a psalm, David recorded this psalm. David was the one who wrote this psalm. David reminds us, okay? Now, in the Holman Christian Standard Bible, instead of the word fret, that translator used the word agitated. All right? So let's replace fret with what he says. Do not be agitated by evildoers. And when you think about it, that does kind of fit better. You understand that word agitation better than you do fret. Because we do get agitated when we see people who we perceive or we think are not right or are actually doing something wrong, and they're very wrong, and it agitates us. It upsets us. But David is reminding us here that we shouldn't be agitated when we look at evildoers. Okay? A very similar psalm, a very similar song to 37 is 73. The 73rd Psalm. And we're not, when you get home, you can read that. That's a psalm of Asaph. And in that psalm, Asaph admits that he did what David said don't do. Okay? In that, you know what? Put your thumb on 37 and flip over to 73. Let's just look at it right quick. Put your thumb on 37 because we're not going to stray, but I just wanted to show y'all this. Like I said, this is kind of a parallel psalm, but it shows you how all of us sometimes get caught up in that. All of us do, and nobody is immune, okay? We all go through times where we look at someone else or we look at somebody that we feel is not being right, and we begin to question, how is that right? And the danger in that is you'll begin to question your own righteousness and sanctification because you'll begin to say things like, well, why should I do good? Why should I do good? I'm doing good and I can't never get on top. And then with this joker over here, we'll say it, this joker over here, he don't have any concern for the Lord and seem like he always blessed. Seem like he always on top. And we'll begin, and if we spend too much time with that, it'll begin to affect us, and we're going to talk about this a little later on tonight. It'll begin to affect us in ways that it shouldn't, okay? So when you look at the 37th Psalm, where David tells us, don't be agitated because of evildoers, okay? And don't be envious of people who work iniquity. See, that goes back to that, why should I do good? This joke over there ain't doing right, and he always seemed to prosper. Well, Asaph fell into that trap. When you look at the 73rd Psalm, look at what Asaph says beginning at verse 2. Because now the first thing he says, and this is, well, let's begin at 1. Let's look at 1. He says that, listen, surely God is good to Israel. All right, I ain't Israel. Okay, don't get caught up in that. Okay? Look closely at what he says. To such as are pure in heart. God is good to those who are pure in heart. That's why you got to be careful about getting caught up in that, because it'll begin to affect you in ways where you'll start living and doing things that are ungodly. You start doing things that are ungodly when we should all keep our hearts pure before God. Every day we ought to work so that our hearts are pure before God. But look at what he says. God is good to Israel, to such as are pure in heart. But as for me, I like that. He went on and got transparent. I'm going to tell y'all the truth. I'm going to tell y'all the truth. He went on and got transparent. My feet had almost stumbled. My steps had nearly slipped. And then he tells us why. Because I was envious of the boastful when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. So in other words, he took his eyes off of God, put his eyes on what he saw, and it affected his heart in a way that almost caused him to stumble. That's why it's important for us to go back to what David says. Don't be agitated because people do evil. Don't let that get you. This is BLV, Bing Living Version. Don't get crunk up because you see other people. Okay? That's what David is saying here. Asaph admits that he did. He didn't listen to Psalm 37. And because of that, he said, I almost slipped.
Do you think that happens because of how we measure
Yeah, I believe that could be part of it. I believe that could be part of it. Because you're absolutely right. It's like, it's like that sermon, and I know y'all have heard me preach because I preached it a couple of times, obstacles to the abundant life. And one of the obstacles, because Jesus says, listen, I come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. But we'll have some people say, I ain't living no abundant life, but the reason they don't see that they're living an abundant life is because they're measuring it in terms of material things. And so they think I don't have an abundant life because I don't have a lot of stuff. Or I don't have a lot of money in the bank, or I don't, and so they begin to say I don't have the abundant life instead of looking at what you do have, the things that money can't buy. And you got those things that money can't buy, not realizing that there's your abundance right there. So we have to remember that. So I think that's a good point, Minister Jackson. I think that's a very good point. I think we get caught up in looking at the prosperity of the wicked because too much we hold on to material things and what they have. And so we begin to think. And so Asaph admits he didn't take David's advice to not be agitated by evildoers. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Okay? And then Asaph, he goes on and he talks about the stuff that he noticed. He started looking. He started looking, and the more he looked at it, the angrier he got. And y'all, let's be honest. Don't we do that? The more we look at it, the angrier we get. Or the more we say, that ain't right. That just ain't fair. That just ain't right. Here I am trying to do everything I can to be a good Christian. And look at me, I'm having to scrape, rob Peter to pay, all of that. But again, that goes back to what Minister Jackson was talking about. We just looking at material. Okay? So Asaph goes on and he tells you why he was like that. He said, I looked at them, there are no pains in their death. Their strength is firm. Here I am. I saw you chick getting the, I said, man, chick stepping pretty good. I said you were walking from around the truck to get back in the truck, and you had your old chick Jones step going. I ain't see the stick. Okay. But let's just take, let's take chick. Let's take Nellie for an example. If they're not careful, they'll look and say, now look at him. He ain't living right. Do whatever. And look at him. He's just as strong as ever. Just as strong as ever. And here I am. I got to have a cane. Or here I am. It take me, I have to wake up 30 minutes earlier because the first 15, I got to sit on the edge of the bed. Oh, yeah. It's like a lot of, and for y'all who don't, live on. Like my mama said, live on. Yeah, I used to be able to jump right up out of the bed. I used to, yeah. Oh, man, long get off, jump right. Not no more. Now you turn, put your feet on the floor, you sit there. And I even watch my little brother, little Derek. Even Derek, I tell you, I watch him sometimes. Sometimes he'll be sitting there in that chair and you'll see him. He'll take his hand and go. Yeah, and I look, I say, bro, I know what you're going through. But we look at that, and it seems like those, so Asaph was looking at that, and he goes on, he says, listen, their strength is firm. They are not in trouble like other men. Some of us, listen, how many of us, what's that old saying, if it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have no luck at all. That's what some of us say to ourselves. Man, some of us say to ourselves, man, I always got something going on in my life. Always, I can't never have no peace. I always got something going on in my life. Asaph was saying that. And he's looking at those who are wicked. Because we know there are a lot of people like that. And I'm talking about people who have no regard for God, no regard for the things of God. They laugh at us. Jesus, y'all foolish for believing that. Y'all believe in that. And I didn't even heard someone say, y'all believe in that white man. Listen, y'all, we ain't got time today, but if y'all ever want to talk, we can sit down and talk, and I'll explain to you. Listen, you go back to the continent of Africa. Christianity was on the continent of Africa way before Europe was developed. Okay? So don't come with that white. Like I told y'all first Sunday when we preached that sermon about Simon from Cyrene. Go back, read the Bible. Philip was walking along. There's an Ethiopian eunuch reading the scriptures. And he asked him, you understand what you read? No, I don't. I wish I had somebody that too. Come on, let me explain to you. And after he finished explaining the scripture, the Ethiopian eunuch said, well, there goes some water right there. Let's go baptize me. Let me get baptized. So when people come at y'all like that, and listen, I ain't telling y'all to argue back with them. I'm just telling y'all so y'all know this for yourselves. Christianity was on the continent of Africa way before the King James Version was translated for King James. Okay? All right. But there are people who have no regard for God. None. And they think that religion is foolish. They think that spirituality is foolish. They say things like there is no God. There are people out there like that. And when you know that there are people like that, and you look at them and you saying to yourself, because you know that you looking at God been good to them, but they saying ain't no God. And you start to say to yourself, well, golly, don't fall into that. That's what happened to Asaph. That's what happened to him. He started looking and saying, whoa, this ain't right. Yes, sir. Do right by people, right. But here's the thing. Again, how can you do right by people if you don't know what's right? How do we know what's right? Listen, it's like I told y'all before. The Bible makes it clear. We love him because he first loved us. That don't mean that we love him in response to his love for us. That means that we wouldn't even know what love is if God never loved us first. You don't know what love is until you've experienced God's love. So it's the same thing. Just do right by people. Well, how I know how to do right by people if I ain't never come in contact with God? He goes on, he says, they never in trouble as other men. Y'all, you see that? Nor are they plagued like other men. Therefore pride serves as their necklace. Violence covers them like a garment. Their eyes bulge with abundance. I got more, and I want some more. Like Teddy Pendergrass. I want more of you. I ain't gonna sing it, but y'all know that song. y'all remember Teddy. He goes on. He their eyes bulge with abundance, and we know people like that. Anybody ever met somebody like that? They have. You're looking at them, and you saying, "Wow, God has really been blessed." Has blessed you. That's what you're saying to yourself. But they're constantly more. And I always say, whenever you're chasing more, something is going to have to pay. What I mean by that, something is going to be sacrificed in order for you to keep doing more. Something going to have to pay. And oftentimes people like that. It's God and service to God and faith in him that pays the price. Like I heard one theologian say one time, we always sacrifice God's cow. We don't sacrifice ours. We sacrifice God's cow. That's what he means, that's what he means by that. If we got to cut something, if we only got so much, and I want to do this, okay, Lord, I'll pay my offering, tithe and offering later. I want to do this. You sacrifice God's cow. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, well, I'm working. Mm-hmm. I'm paying my tithe. Mm-hmm. How can he have so much? Mm-hmm. Could I read this little article here about mm-hmm. 37 mm-hmm. We should never envy evil people, even though some may be extremely powerful or excessively rich. No matter how much they have, it will fade and vanish like the grass. Mm-hmm. 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 And that's important to remember. And like I said, the reason I wanted us to jump over to the 73rd Psalm is because Asaph did that. He almost did that. Almost. Okay? But he goes on. But anyway, I'm not going to go because we're going to need to get back to 37. But he goes on and talks about all the things that he saw in the wicked and all of the ways that they prospered. And he was saying that almost caused him to stumble. Okay? That almost caused him to stumble. And then just let me point out verse 12 of the 73rd Psalm. He said, behold, look. In other words, look. These are the ungodly who are always at ease. They increase in riches. So again, that goes back to what Minister Jackson was talking about, in that Asaph had got caught up into looking at their riches and the ways that they prospered. And then he comes and says, surely I have cleansed my heart in vain. Like I said, we say, man, what good is it for me to serve the Lord if I got to scrape and struggle and somebody out there that ain't, they being blessed. So that's what Asaph had come. That's where he had come to. Talked about all the trouble that he went through. But in verse 17, he finally comes to his senses. And in verse 17, he says, until I went into the sanctuary of God, then I understood their end. Then I understood their end. Okay? And so what David was saying, I wanted to show y'all in 73 to say that y'all, if you struggling with that, you ain't the first one. Even during that time, Asaph struggled with that. Okay? But like he said, when you learn the goodness of love, when you begin to learn that everything we have comes from him, when you begin to learn those things and you begin to see that, look, their end is different, okay? He goes on, talks about, surely you set them up on a slippery slope. Meaning, look, oh yeah, they may look like they're sitting high, but listen, it's already hard to stand on a slope. It's even harder to stand on a slippery slope. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. You wanted it. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Oh, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it ties in with forgiveness because what we're saying is it's going to be hard for you to forgive people who have done you wrong if you're looking at what they've done and it's hard to forgive them if you're saying they're prospering, they did me wrong and they still blessed. It's going to be hard for you to forgive them because you're thinking about an inequity. I'm going to come to you, Marcus. And one more thing to add to that, Tammy, because you're right. A lot of times, and all of us, I believe, I can't say for sure because I'm not all of us, but I believe all of us have done that before where we say, well, I'm going to do what's right because we're looking for God to bless us. I mean, my mama used to even tell me that. You do what's right and God will bless you. But ultimately, we should do what's right because we want to be righteous. We should want to do, and that comes, it's like you said, it comes as you grow. It comes as you grow. Because when you learn and when you say to yourself, I want to do what's right, not because I'm looking for God to bless me for doing what's right. I'm looking to do right so that God sees me as working toward my righteousness. I want to be righteous. I want to do what's right, regardless of the consequence that comes. I want to be able to say I did what's right. Apostle Paul used to oftentimes talk about a clear conscience. See, when you do what's right, your conscience will be clear. I did what was right. And it's like it's like Charles Stanley always says, used to say before he passed, you obey God and leave the consequences to him. So I'm going to do what's right, and whatever God does with that, that's his prerogative. Yes. Right. And the sanctification. You got to grow to that. Because early on in your Christian life, you're not going to think about that. Early on in your Christian life, you are looking at doing right as a transaction. See, don't look at doing right as a transaction. You know, I'm doing this with the expectation of this. Like when you go in the store. You go in the store, if I give you my money, I want that. That's a transaction. But don't look at doing right as a transaction. Do right because you want to be righteous. Yes, sir, Deacon Henry. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Could right. Could have sacrificed family. I mean, a lot of marriages have ended because somebody didn't take up enough time, didn't grow and love their family because they were chasing. Mm-hmm. Right. That's right. That's right. All right. So, if we're going to forgive, we cannot fall into that trap of withholding our forgiveness because we don't like the way that person we perceive as being blessed or as prospering. So I'm not, so we have to be careful. So, verse 3, but look at what the Bible tells us to do. And this is why we have to remember that we got to trust God to handle the situation properly. David says, trust in the Lord and do good. That's what we ought to focus on. Do good, not for something in return, but I trust in God, and I'm going to do good, and I'm going to let my righteousness come through because I trust that God is going to take care of whatever it is. Whatever it is. Right. And see, that's the thing that I believe David wanted us to understand. Trust God, like Reverend Walden said, and he will. And he will. So that's part of trusting God. God, I know you're going to handle this. I know you're going to take care of this. Now, then he says, verse 3, dwell in the land and feed on his faithfulness. What did the NIV say? Enjoy safe pasture. Okay? Enjoy safe pasture. I always tell you, the safest place to be is in the will of God. When you do what God has called you to do, you're safe. You're safe. It's like at work, anybody work for the state? Well, really, almost any company is like that. But it's especially like that when you work for the government. They always tell you. You call your boss and say, well, hey, such. First thing he's going to tell you, what does the policy say? Because if you follow policy, you're safe. It's when you step out of policy that you expose yourself. And so it's the same way with the will of God. If you do the will of God, you're safe. You enjoy that safe pasture, like the NIV says. But then he goes on and says, delight yourself also in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart. When we commit ourselves to him, when we delight ourselves in him, when we trust him, he'll bring it to pass, whatever it is. Whatever it is. And again, let me remind you of this, because a lot of times we forget this. Sometimes we're expecting God to act in a certain way when he's saying, no, I allowed this to happen because I'm trying to do something in you. So a lot of times where you're thinking, get them back, God. Avenge me, God. And God is saying, no, you needed that. You needed that. A lot of times, this is me speaking, a lot of times, things and times like that teach us empathy. It's easy to say what you would, what you wouldn't, and what they should and what they shouldn't do. It's easy to say it till you stand in their shoes or until it comes to your door. And I'm a firm believer, and sometimes God allows that to come to your door so you see. Hard to be empathetic if you ain't been through what that person done been through. God has so many times taught me that. You feel what they feeling. Now you see. It was easy to sit back and say, when my kids was little, it was easy for me to talk about folks who had teenagers and what they was and wasn't doing, till my kids got to be teenagers. And it was easy for me to talk about what they wasn't doing when other folks had grown kids and mine was still under my roof. But then when they left from under my roof, I had to learn some things then. God has a way of teaching us. He has a way of teaching us. And so David says, listen, when we trust in God and do good, when we delight ourselves in God, he'll give us the desires of our heart. And sometimes we get what we get because that was God's will for us to get that. Okay? All right, somebody, verse 5.
Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun.
Stop. Wow. David makes it plain. Commit your way to the Lord. That's why, like Tammy was talking about, and like I said, don't do right as a transaction. Do right because it's right. Because you want to commit your way. I'm doing what's right because I'm committing that to you, Lord. So that because he tells us, because when you do that, he's going to bring it to pass. What? Whatever. He's going to bring it to pass. And then look at what he says in verse 6. God will bring forth your right. God will bring forth your righteousness as the light. In other words, everybody's going to see it. Ain't going to be hidden no more. All of us, let me rewind. I believe all of us have been in that situation of where we thought, or we let somebody in our ear about something or somebody, and we were believing what that person said, and by the time God was through with it, it was nothing like that person was saying, and actually the one who was right rose to the top. You know what? They was talking about Chandra like that. I was believing that. But now the Lord done shown me she was right. I'm going to have to use somebody else. Chandra talk back to me. But y'all see what I'm saying? Well, do you see what David is saying? That when we do right, God will bring forth our righteousness. Listen, sometimes doing what's right is, hey man, I'm in Bible study. You always ask me what I'm doing. I'm in Bible study. I'll call you when I leave. I'll call you when I leave, Lonzo. I'll call you when I leave. I'm in Bible study. I'm teaching.
Okay.
All right. All right. That's one of my friends I grew up with. Always, every time he'd call me at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. Man, you ain't working on your sermon? Man, I'm at work at my DJJ. But when we're righteous and we do righteous, God will reveal it and he'll show. When it's done, everybody is going to see. That's one thing about when God does it. When God does it, everybody sees it. He shall bring forth your righteousness as the light and your justice as what? It says as noonday here. Okay, like the noonday sun. Everybody is going to see it. So, go take the cover off. Yeah. And here's another thing I want you to remember about that. Do what's right even when nobody else knows. You ain't got to tell nobody. You ain't got to tell nobody. You know, there have been times that somebody will come and they'll say to me, well, They told me that you such and such and such. And I know that's not true. But I don't go back one thing I've learned as I've gotten older, I don't go back, he lying. Mm-mm. Now I just say, is that what he told you? Okay. Yep, exactly. Okay. Is that what he told you? Okay. Because when you do, now listen, if you ain't done what's right, but when you do what's right, you ain't got to go back and forth with nobody. You ain't got to go back and forth with. David tells us God is going to bring forth your righteousness. God is going to bring forth your righteousness. Verse. Oh, well, that could be a lot of things. I would wrap all of it up into flesh. Could be pride. Could be ego. Could be you hadn't grown enough in that area of your life. Because there's some things that are easier for us to do right than others, and it just means you hadn't grown enough in that area yet. But I believe all of that can be wrapped up into the battle between the spirit and the flesh. The spirit is always telling you or always prompting you, I'll say that, is always prompting you to do what's right. And I say prompting because God, remember what I said? God don't make you do nothing. I know that's a double negative. God don't make you do nothing. He'll prompt you. He'll prompt you, but the decision is yours. That's free will. That's the free will he gave us. Unfortunately, like the Winans say, millions ain't going to make it. Even though they have the opportunity, they'll be prompted, but everybody's not going to make it. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. All right, verse 7.
Verse 7. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways.
Stop. Wait patiently for him. Sometimes when you're doing what's right, sometimes when you're under attack, sometimes when you're being persecuted, sometimes it's hard for you to forgive because you are impatient because God ain't moving fast enough for you. Lord, how long am I going to have to put up with this person? Lord, I've been putting up with this person for fill in the blank. But David reminds us, you got to wait patiently on God. He says, wait patiently on the Lord, wait patiently on him, and don't be agitated because of him who prospers in his own way. How many times have you said, you know what? I done tried to let God handle it, but y'all ever heard anybody say that? But I'm going to have to fix this. Whoa, so you can fix it better than God. Boy, you something. You something special. If you can fix it better than God. I done tried to wait. I done tried to let you handle it. I done tried, but now I'm going to have to you have to wait patiently on God. And don't fret because of him who prospers in his way. Let him have it. I'm waiting on God, and I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to do what's right. Oh, go ahead, Reverend Walden. Uh-huh. Came to Mister. Oh, yeah. What was her name in there? Miss Sophia. Sophia. Yeah, yeah. And you know, with us, a lot of times that's how we get. That's why it's hard for us to forgive. Because we want to handle it our way. And we get impatient because really, I should have been, how many times you done heard somebody say that? I should have been got you straight. Y'all done heard people say that before? I should have been got you straight. Because that's our thing. Yeah, we fall into that Sophia trap. Right. We say, yeah, it's taking God too long. Yeah. Yeah. But David reminds us that we have to wait patiently for God. And don't get agitated because of people who prosper in their way. There are some people who are crooked and wicked, and no matter what you do, they're going to still be crooked and wicked. No matter what you do, no matter how you treat them, no matter how well you treat them or how bad you treat them, they're going to be that way. But when you, as the Christian, treat them bad, then you're venturing away from what God told you to do. You stepping out of the will of God. And when anytime you step out of the will of God, you expose yourself. God's will is our covering. When we step out of it, we expose ourselves. Okay? That's why Job did what he did. Regardless of what he suffered, he refused to curse God. And he stayed in God's will. Now, did he question? Yes. Yes, he questioned. That was natural. I tell people all the time, what Job did in the conversations that he had with himself and the conversations that he had with God. I don't believe in for a minute that God was angry at him for those questions that he asked. I don't believe for a minute that God was angry when Job said, oh, I cursed the day I was born. I wish I was never born. Because sometimes things in life will weigh you down to that point that you will. Some of you may have never experienced that. But there are people who have experienced things in their life that did. It made them feel like that. Man, I wish I was never born. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever, it's a TV series. I don't know if it still comes on. If it's still, yeah. It's called Snapped. And it talks about people that went through that. But see, even in that, because, you know, we do and we feel like it, but we got to also understand that you got to let God handle it. You got to trust in God. And let's go, and here we go. Second part of verse 7 says, because of the man, do not fret, don't be agitated because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who brings wicked schemes to pass. I like that, y'all, there are people who are constantly, you know, I've known some people like that. And I'll even go as far as to say that, you know, they were friends of mine or acquaintances. They were always, I call them slick. Yes, they were always scheming. Always scheming. You know, trying to find some way to be slick or to scheme. And so David is saying you can't worry about those people. Because a lot of times we're apart. We're on the receiving end, so we get angry. But then let's move into what he says next. Verse 8.
Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret. It leads only to evil.
Stop right there. You ain't getting them back. are hurting yourself. New King James says, cease from anger and forsake wrath. Cease from anger. Stop letting, if we were the BLV, stop letting that get under your skin. Cease from anger, forsake wrath. Don't worry, don't be agitated. It only causes harm. Like I told y'all last week, your blood pressure up off the chart. And they grinning. They going on about their life. And you got a headache. Your head hurt. You can't shake that headache. David, listen, y'all, I told y'all the other side, everything, the Bible has everything we need. And it's told us. David says this, stop allowing people to get you to the point. Cease from anger, forsake wrath, do not fret, it only causes harm. And it ain't harm to the other person, it's harm to us, to you. Yeah, that's a good point. That's the other thing too. It hinders your witness. You're not leaving, are you? I need to see y'all, deacons, trustees, for a minute after we wrap up. We're about to wrap up in a couple of minutes, and you too, Marion. So David is telling us here, and so if we're trying to get to the point that we're able to forgive, you have to trust God to handle the situation properly, because if you get angry or get so angry, if you allow wrath to raise up in you, if you continue to be agitated, you're only hurting yourself. Let me tell y'all something. Let me put it in the, I hear this a lot now. Protect your peace. Y'all ever heard that? You need to protect your peace at all costs. That's what David is saying. See, all these new things, these sayings, they ain't new. The Bible addresses them. They just say it in a different way. That's what David's saying. Protect your peace. Now listen, protecting your peace don't mean that you can necessarily cut somebody out. What David is saying is you need to cease from anger. You need to not let wrath rise up in you. You need to stop being so agitated. You need to. That's how, listen, a lot of times protecting our peace is up to us. And it ain't about necessarily removing somebody, because listen, let's be honest, all of us who are married, our spouses done invaded our peace. But you can't leave your spouse because he done took your peace or she done took your peace. You can't leave him. Man. Well, but yeah, some people do say that, and some people do that. That's why the divorce rate is over 50% now, because I'm going to protect my peace by leaving you. We ain't been married but a year and a half. What you talking about? Man, you ain't even gave me a chance to grow. And any of us that done been married a long time can tell you, we ain't the same person we was when we first got married. I ain't even that same man no more. Thank God. Yeah. Life changes you. And then especially if you living for God, he changes you. Yeah, right. If you, right. Yeah. Ooh, I like that. But you know what, Reverend? Did y'all hear what Reverend Walton said? Psalm 55 tells us to cast our burdens on God and he'll uphold us in the struggle. How many times when we're going through Remember what I've been telling y'all throughout this whole lesson? We try to do it in our own power. Yeah. A lot of times we do, or we just give up and we try to remove ourselves from it. And sometimes removing yourself, that ain't God's will anyway. Sometimes God uses, and we see this throughout history, God uses enemies, people's enemies, to grow them and to mold them and to move them closer to where God wants them. Yep. Mm-hmm. And that, what you're saying, Sister Walden, is to what Deacon Henry was saying when he said that a lot of times when we don't, like when we getting beaten up, and I don't think, you don't mean that literally, right? Okay, yeah, figuratively speaking. Yeah, I know. But we're going through what we go through. It feels like we're getting beaten up. And like Marcus says, because, and I always, I'll always say this, because we can't damage our witness. There are people, I saw a video where somebody went into his wallet. He was at the airport at JFK, and he went to go buy him a Starbucks coffee or whatever. And when he got there, he opened up his wallet, didn't have no money. And he was like, I know I had money. So first thing you do, you go back to TSA. And so he went to TSA. Hey, somebody stole my money. They pulled up the cameras, everything, and sure enough, not one of the TSA agents, but another passenger, somehow, because like sometimes you leave your stuff there because you got to go put on your shoes, and you over there hopping to put on your shoes. That lady went in and stole his money. But they were able to take all those series of cameras, and they tracked her down at a restaurant. Yes. Police tracked her down at a restaurant, still in the airport, and got the man money back. Here's what I'm saying about that. One of the comments says, she was stupid because cameras are everywhere. Okay? And you always remember that, because they are. Cameras are everywhere. They're everywhere. Everywhere. Here's my thing. Here's the point that I'm making to that. Somebody is watching you to see if you walk what you talk. They see what's going on too, and they're watching you. Somebody's always watching you. And so we have to remember that, because oftentimes when we're getting beaten, like Sister Walden and Deacon Henry said, God is letting be. Okay, so I need you to respond in the right way, because I got this person over here that I'm trying to reach, and it's through your witness that they're going to see and say, I want what she got. I need that kind of peace that she got. I need to be able to handle things the way she handles them. Or like Marcus say, because you never want to kill your witness. When David committed his sin with Bathsheba, and the prophet Nathan went to him and gave him that parable. And of course, we remember how David reacted, Oh, that was horrible. Whoever did that, they're going to pay. They're going to do this. And then Nathan told him, it's you. You are the man. You are the man. So he turned it around, gave him a story, turned him around and said, now look in the mirror, because that's you. But here, do y'all remember what Nathan told him? After he told him, listen now, the child going to die. But God ain't going to take you off the throne. Did y'all remember what he told him after that? No, he told him, but you have given the enemies of the Lord great reason to blaspheme his name. In other words, what he was telling David was, your witness gave the enemies of God who knew that you were a man after God's own heart. Now they looking and saying, oh, really? Oh, that's what y'all do? So that's what we have to remember. That's what we have to remember, that people are always, they're constantly watching us. Yes, God is always watching us, but there are people who are watching us too. And oftentimes, God is at work in somebody's life, and he wants to use your righteousness as a witness to somebody else. All right. Any questions? Any questions? All right. All right, next week we're going to start on those other scriptures that I gave y'all last week. We're going to start to look at the biblical meaning of forgiveness. We're going to look at the biblical meaning of forgiveness, okay? All right, before we go, let me go ahead and just tell you all now. You know, Ben, y'all know we were blessed last week. We was able to get it in. Like I used to always say when we'd be refereeing football and Storm be like, ooh, Lord, let us just get half the game in. Because we get half the game in, we still get paid. So let us get half the game in. So we were able to get church in last week before the weather came. I don't think we're going to be as lucky this week. So, this time. Yes. And we don't play with that. Don't play with that ice. So right now, we probably at about 98% that we're not going to be here on Sunday, okay? Because the only way we're going to have church on Sunday is if it don't rain at all on Saturday, because my concern is, and all of our concerns should be, that whatever falls on Saturday, when those temperatures drop overnight, it's going to freeze up these roads. And black ice is no joke, okay? So even if we don't get, because I saw that some of the models and some of the forecasts were kind of leaning away from as much, because at one point, y'all, I was thinking, oh, Lord, this is going to be 2014 all over. But it looks like it's coming off of that. But again, like the meteorologists are saying, it's a forecast. They don't know. It could change. But I think even if it does do what they're saying, where we won't have as much, our concern is going to be whatever falls on Saturday is going to freeze up overnight into Sunday. I'll send a flock note out, but we're at about 98% right now because they're saying it's going to rain Saturday. At the minimum, it's going to rain. But there may be some sleet and freezing rain in there. So we're not going to take any chances. But I'll send a flock note out just to be sure. But for right now, we're at about 98%. We won't be here on Sunday. Stay safe, and y'all stay in. That means, listen, even if we don't come to church, stay in. If you don't have to go anywhere, don't go. Don't go. Stay in. Stay in. Stay in. Right, and the bridges freeze faster than the road. And then that black ice, that's the thing you really got to be concerned with, that black ice. All right, deacons and trustees, I just need to see y'all just right quick. And you too, Marion. All right, y'all be careful. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so. Okay. Y'all got crews coming into town already? Good. Okay. So if we do have any power outages, thank goodness, the Georgia Power people are gearing up. So. All right, he said everybody live in the country got a well, fill your bathtub up with water. All right. Hey, Thelma says she's charging admission this time. she said she taking over this time. She charging admission. She's going to be at the gate. You can't even pull in the driveway till you pay Thelma. All right, but y'all be careful, really. Y'all be careful, really. Don't play with that. Let's be careful. But I'll send a flock note out to let everybody know for sure. All right? Good to see all the kids here. Yeah, good. Awesome. Yes, ma'am. Jada? All right. All right. All right. All right. And thank you, Jada. Thank you for stepping up. All right, Mimi. All right, man. Awesome. Awesome. So y'all come on back. Let the kids know. Y'all come on back. Come on back. Wow. And also, I hadn't responded to it yet. Carson has flu too. So y'all remember, still be careful with that flu. Keep your hands washed. That's the key. Keep your hands washed. Keep your hands washed. All right. With his heart. Where is he at? Piedmont. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So my brother that